Just an overview, we are starting today with week 1. We are going to face the topic of navigating life, manifesting, and solving problems like the Fool, which you'll soon come to see that in the symbolic language of tarot, the initial meaning might not be the actual meaning that is intended by the card. So often we think of foolishness as being silly, but we're going to get a little bit into the Fool card today, and you'll see that there's a deep wisdom present in foolishness. So our aims are to lay the groundwork for the course by introducing the major concepts that connect you to what real manifestation and problem solving are all about. So, yeah, there's a lot of pop cultural things about problem solving and manifestation, some with a great degree of utility and some that might be a bit surface level, but we're going to really deep dive into the exploration and science of the inner state of consciousness. So instead of, exploring the environment around us, really exploring the environments within. So today in session 1, we will be talking about the wisdom of the cosmos as the foolishness of man, the introduction to this journey. Tomorrow, Tuesday, we'll be talking about the magician, Mercury, and the one power you actually have. Session 3, we'll be talking about the High Priestess card and tapping into your lunar consciousness. Session 4, we will discuss the Empress, the creative intelligence and manifestation, always a favorite. And then session 5 on Friday this week, we will discuss the Emperor, seeing clearly and setting your house in order, which is a step often skipped and forgotten about, but nonetheless quite important. So we will be spending today with this slide, Key 0, the Fool. The wisdom of the cosmos is the foolishness of man. And I have made notes on these slides for you. You'll get a copy of these slides, but there is much more to be explored than what I have simply written down for you here. So I'd like you to start, not just reading the words, but just look at the card. This is one of the major keys of the tarot, is your actual sight and your vision. Right? One of the meanings of the all-seeing eye, which is sometimes depicted on this card in esoteric decks. The all-seeing eye, that single eye that you sometimes see, the eye of Horus, it's in the triangle on the dollar bill, right? This all-seeing eye, what does it mean? Well, it means that sight is often a key to unlocking truths, okay? And that's what we will be doing largely with the tarot, is we are using our sight to gaze upon these cards and to unlock their symbolic meanings. And anybody who's a student of semiotics, right, the study of symbol or the study of language as symbol, knows that a single signifier, so the thing we think of as the symbol, right, the image, the letter, the word, has multiple potential signified meanings. Right? This is why we can have a single symbol, and people from different walks of life might gaze upon it and take a different meaning away. It's not that either person is necessarily incorrect, although they might be incorrect from the other person's perspective, right? It's that a symbol has the potent power to produce a multiplicity of meanings. And so we're going to keep that in mind as we look at each symbol. And of course, there are specific interpretations of these symbols that are going to be correct according to these systems. But then you yourself and your own subconscious awareness might find additional meanings that are revealed to you via these symbols. So looking at the card, very important. We'll do it every single class. And this card is called the Fool. It is key 0. And the titles of these cards, as well as the numbers of these cards and their associated astrological meanings and their associated meanings in the Hebrew alphabet, which is largely associated with the tarot, these things have potent meanings. Okay. So I'd like to start with the title, The Fool. It throws a lot of people off. A lot of people call the tarot, which is a path of wisdom, the fool's journey. And people wonder sometimes, well, the fool, wisdom, it seems like an opposite. And of course, we have this beautiful saying that the wisdom of the divine or the cosmos is the foolishness of man. Because those who are often the most enlightened in society are often seen as silly by the broader culture, because the broader culture doesn't always value a deepening wisdom of consciousness that doesn't place value on what society places value, right? Society says, go be successful, and success is defined via a narrow set of circumstances. And if you don't fit into that, you might be seen as foolish in some manner. But we know that foolishness in this case is depicting true wisdom. So let's talk about the etymology of the word fool, because it does a lot to elucidate this meaning and really to show us the most important practice we can do with this card. So fool comes from the Latin phallus. Phallus has a couple of meanings. One of the meanings is a leather purse. And you'll see if you look at the card, the fool is carrying a leather purse, usually depicted with an eagle upon it. This is symbolizing subconsciousness. It's also showing us the power of Mars as is depicted through the energy of Scorpio, which the eagle is a symbol, right? And so we have this leather satchel here, one meaning of the word phallus. Now, the other meaning of this is a wind bag, right? Like a leather purse that you would use as a bellows in olden times, right? A wind bag is one of the reasons why we use the word fool as we do sort of regularly, right? Is someone that we would call a windbag, is someone who maybe talks a lot or frivolously, doesn't think their words through, and that's when we call them a fool in sort of the rudimentary term. But here we're talking about a different form of the windbag, and this is shown to us by the leather satchel and also by the color of the background, which is yellow, right? The sky, you'll notice, is yellow and the sun is white. This is indicating that this is not the solar sun that we necessarily see in our sky, but the esoteric meaning of the sun beyond the sun. So the originating point of the energy of the sun, which in these systems, we decide is the energy of everything. And, truthfully, when you look into sort of the science of where atoms have come from, electromagnetism, you start to realize, oh, the sun really is an origin point of the energy of everything. But in this case, we're thinking about a windbag, a fool, a phallus, and we are thinking about the windbag of the body, which is the lungs. Okay. This is shown too in this yellow sky, as I noted, because yellow is the energy here of air, right? All of the colors, spoiler alert, in the tarot have meaning. And so we will learn to look at color in the tarot and to derive certain meanings from them. So when we see yellow in the tarot, we immediately think the energy of air, right? This windbag of the body is our capacity to breathe. And I always like to bring this up with the Fool card, is that in many, many languages, the word for spirit, right, including the word for spirit in English, means the same thing as breathing. And we have this idea that to be alive, to be embodied, means to be imbued with spirit, right? An inanimate body is not a living body, right? A breathing body is a living body. And so we understand spirit on the sort of esoteric level of our life force energy, right? This is the meaning of the word prana in yoga, right? Used to consider the breath, but also used to understand the life force energy imbued into the body upon the breath. In Hebrew, we have the word ruach, which has the same meaning as prana. And in English, we have the word spirit, or to inspire, right? To breathe in. And so we have these ideas flowing through linguistically to teach us something that the Fool is teaching us. And several of you guys in this course have studied AstroYoga teacher training with me, and I know that you know that the body itself, right? The body itself is not divorced from spirit. It's not divorced from the cosmos. We are not like matter and spirit. We are a commingling of these things, and perhaps they can't be separated from one another, at least in the plane in which we live. And so this is one of the most key meanings in this card. Now, we have a Hebrew letter associated with each card, and I don't want to get too deeply into the Kabbalistic mysteries, although the keys will naturally lead you down a path to exploring the Kabbalistic mysteries. But I do want to bring up the key forms of the Hebrew alphabet with each card. And so they move through the alphabet in order, right? And we have Aleph meaning ox. Okay, Aleph also in Hebrew is considered to be almost the silent sound, almost like the sound before the A in apple, right? Aleph. And the meaning of this is ox. And sometimes people are like, ox, I don't get it, because we don't live in a society now where we necessarily use ox in the same way, or oxen, I should say, in the same way that they once were used. But if you study yoga, you know that one of the key words in yoga is to yoke, right? Yuj, one of the root words in yoga, is to yoke. And when we consider the yoke, this is something that we put upon the oxen, right? And we're talking about yoking the higher self to the embodied self, right? Or rather, yoking the embodied self to the higher self, right? Tying these two together. And so we have this idea of the enculturated, because oxen are used, they're an enculturated form of the bull, right? It's enculturated to become something useful. And we see here the Fool is actually a depiction, and you'll remember the sun beyond the sun, of what we like to term the higher self or super conscious energy. Okay, you might look at this and be like, okay, it's a young man, a youth. I suppose it could be a young woman, but it's a young man, walking on a cliff's edge with a little dog. And a lot of people will look at it and say something like, oh, you're reading your tarot deck and you say it's the Fool card. It means new beginnings, eternal youthfulness. And it's like, well, sort of. Yes, it does mean eternal youthfulness, because the highest sense of self, the highest spirit of the human, no matter their age, is always in an eternally youthful state. What I mean is, and here comes the meaning of the zero, one of the meanings. Within the realms of manifest consciousness, the highest sense of consciousness is always at the burgeoning opening of youthful, exuberant excitement. In yoga, we have this idea of the Tattvic structure of reality, where we have sort of the highest principles of consciousness, sometimes termed the Hridaya or the Shiva Shakti at the top, or in other traditions, sometimes there are fewer tattvic structures and you have Purusha and Prakriti at the top, moving all the way down into just like the most mundane pieces of reality. And we have this idea that in any experience in reality, you can, and in fact, in a certain sense, you must be experiencing the highest form of consciousness. Now, most of the time, we are unconscious of the highest form of consciousness operational in the mundane principles of reality. You can check in with yourself right now and say, am I aware of the highest principle of reality? You know, as I drink my water or listen to this lesson, maybe. Am I aware of it while I'm showering, taking a walk, eating some breakfast, you know, all of these things? Nonetheless, this principle is always at play. And we see this through the meaning of the 0 in this card. Okay, so numerologically, 0 can be added to any other number and that number will remain the same, right? Additionally, if you multiply 0 times any number, that number becomes 0. And so we have this understanding that 0 is at once unperceptible and very, very powerful. Okay. It cannot necessarily be divorced from any number, because if you subtract 0, the number remains the same. You cannot subtract 0. And so we live with 0 as a constant presence. Now, this card, if you look at it, it's very hopeful. It's very joyful. And one of the mundane uses of this card, by the way, is as a spirit uplifter, right? So if you are experiencing sadness, right? If you are experiencing low energy, these sorts of things, looking at the Fool card, gazing upon the Fool card, meditating with the Fool card can help lift your spirits. And there's that word again, spirit, right? It's a very potent use for this. Okay. So I'd like to run through a couple of the symbols in this, just so you have them in your minds. Beyond the Fool, we have the mountain heights. The mountain heights, you'll see there's ice on top, and then they descend into a bluish color. These colors too have symbolic meaning, but we're going to get into blue very deeply later this week. So maybe I'll leave my discussion for the color blue till later. But we see these mountain heights beyond the Fool. And these are thought to be energies sort of preceding the energy in the foreground. And the mountain heights here symbolize the truths of the universe, which are imperceptible almost to our senses and knowable through very esoteric and intense systems of mathematics. Right? You'll see if you look at science, if you have the mental patience for that, I should say, very advanced mathematics, very advanced scientists wind up doing these amazing strings of mathematics that show them the principles in quantum theories and string theory, right? They start to understand the universe in this very esoteric way through the understanding of mathematics. And so we have this understanding that the universe is in some way orderly, and that it's also kind of beyond where we are right now, right? It's beyond our perceptible understanding, although we can gaze upon it from a distance. Then we have the valley below, right? The valley below represents this manifest world. This is the knowable world in which we operate, but in which we don't always perceive everything that's going on, right? Things happen to you and you don't always know why. But a big piece of what we'll be doing in this class and with the tarot is beginning to understand a little bit more why and how, right? Now, you won't always know why, you won't always know how. To try to always know why and how can cause suffering. But to open yourself to knowing why and how in a more profound and real way can open the doors to heightened levels of conscious understanding. And so we have this idea that the Fool is this intermediary. He is descending from the heights, coming down into the manifest world of the valley below. And we see this with the highest self, right? And if you look at him, he's looking up, right? Because he knows he can do anything and be anywhere, but he's choosing to go down. But he's most connected with this highest principle of reality, right? As he goes down, though, he takes new forms, but he remains himself. He remains at the height of his youthful exuberance and travels lightly. And we'll talk about the symbols of what he's traveling with in just a moment. Now, you also see a little white dog next to him. White in the tarot symbolizes purity, innocence. It has kind of a Judeo-Christian association. You know, you'll see white dresses used a lot for these sorts of things because it's very hard, if you've ever had a white piece of clothing, to keep it quite clean, right? So the white dog represents a sort of innocence, and yet a dog represents an animal form of consciousness. And so it's funny, this morning, early, I have a dog and I opened the door and he ran right outside and tried to grab a squirrel. And I was like, oh, I wish you wouldn't, but that is his instinct. And it's very hard to stop that when he's just running around. And so the little white dog represents the human consciousness. Okay, this is our intellect. And our intellect in this card is very friendly to the higher self. And this is representative of how we, at the burgeoning moment of the Aquarian age, are very amenable in a certain way mentally to studying things like this, to learning about the higher self. And yet we are not the higher self, right? The higher self is this higher portion. Now, a piece of us is the higher self, right? But the human intellect, right? We could make mistakes. We could be confused. We could do something totally, off the wall. And yet we're doing it from a state of innocence, as is implied by the little white dog. We're not purposefully making mistakes. We're just sometimes interpreting things incorrectly. And that is what the tarot helps to fix, right? And so they're walking together. They are friends. Now, the next thing I'd like to talk about is the clothing that the Fool is wearing. You'll notice it's kind of a weird outfit. Nothing in the tarot, though, is without meaning. And so we see the Fool, and you'll see his undergarment is white. And so we have this idea that, okay, the higher self is pure and innocent in its expression. And if you look very closely on the collar, and some tarot cards are less clear than others, but the sacred name is known to be written upon the collar of the Fool. The sacred name, so the tarot comes a lot from the Kabbalistic schools, and as you might have noticed, they use the Hebrew language. In yoga, we use the Sanskrit language. Both of these languages are ancient and considered to be very potent in the ways that they were designed and used. In other words, they are mantric languages. And so the sacred name, the four-letter word, right, is the Yod He Vav He. This is, in sort of pop culture, sometimes people pronounce it like they say Jehovah. It's not quite that. It's the Yod He Vav He. And the meaning of this, one of the meanings of this is that which was and is to come. And this is representative of the highest principle of reality being eternal. And so we're talking about something in this card where it's like, okay, every single spirit, there's that word again, on earth, including you, including me, is in some way eternal. It was here before time. It will be here after time. Now, the cloaks it wears in our physical bodies, we all know, grow and change and pass away and come back, right? Yet, we're talking about something eternal when we're talking about the Fool. And so this is the eternal wisdom, the eternal highest principle, the ways in which we conceive it at its highest level. Now, the Fool, you'll notice, is a human. And you might be thinking to yourself, I don't think the highest principle of all of manifest reality is a human, right? Because human beings, we're a complicated bunch, and we are not, in fact, eternal in our single form lifespan. And so when we're looking at the Fool card, you might think, it's a human. But it's because we are human that this is human, because we cannot quite glimpse the eternal principle of all reality. This is shown by the belt having no clasp, right? It is tied on there. We cannot get into it because we can't quite glimpse it. And so we project our own human nature upon any principles at which we are looking, discussing, and so it's almost inescapable. We'll come back to the belt in just a second. Nothing is more exciting than talking about this belt. Well, I shouldn't say nothing, but it's a pretty exciting thing. So we have this sort of cloak of innocence on the underside, this understanding that this is an eternal nature of all reality. And then we have this outer jacket that he is wearing. You'll see it's black, it's green. On the inner sleeves, it's red, and then it has a bunch of things on it. It has these 10, 8-spoked wheels. It has a sun and a moon. It has a flame and a circle. And you'll be like, that's interesting. It has a bunch of green trefoils. So we have this cloak, right? The black represents the shadow and sort of the occult understanding, occult meaning hidden. So it's indicating to us that some principle of reality is being hidden from us. We don't yet see it all. And, if you've been meditating long or doing yoga, there's always more. There's always more to discover. The green is representative of eternal life and the energy of love. The wheels are a symbol for the quintessence, the fifth element, the akasha, right? As well as the whirling wheels of the cosmos that spin reality into being. The flame has a similar meaning in that it's the initial spark of life before manifestation, or that sparks manifestation. And the sun and the moon represent all of these solar and lunar principles that we will get into very deeply in the coming lessons. So maybe I'll spare you too deep of a discussion on that. Now, the red in the inner sleeves is the energy of desire and the raw force of nature. And so we see he cloaks himself in this, which is the cloak that helps us come into whatever forms he's in. And because you've met people who are more tapped into their higher consciousness or less, or maybe your perception of them is actually wrong and they were less tapped in or more tapped in than we presumed, right? We don't know. That consciousness takes many cloaks and many forms. Now, the Fool is wearing a belt, which has notches on it. We can see 7 of them in the card, but through study, we know that there are actually 12 notches, and these 12 notches symbolize time itself. You'll see there's no clasp on the belt. So time itself is something that's very difficult in our current forms to transcend and move beyond. Yet we see from this being on the outside of the jacket that time itself is a human construct. Okay. So when we're looking at this, we are understanding that time itself is something that must be transcended in order to see beyond the cloak of forms and into this white undershirt. Another meaning of which is the eternal, limitless light. Okay, so what we're looking at is not necessarily a picture of a human youth, but a picture of the no thing, the form beyond forms, the eternal principle of all reality, which has decided to come into the world of manifestation. Okay, so this is the thing that we are looking for in each of the cards. This is the things we are looking for in our practice, right? This is the thing we're looking for in our own lives, is what piece of me is this eternal piece, right? Which piece of me is this piece that is always exuberant, always safe, always excited to be on this journey, always walking and capable of being in friendship with my experience right now. A couple other symbols we'll see on the Fool. We see the satchel, which we discussed in terms of the etymology of the word fool, but which also represents the coming forth of the subconsciousness, of the memory of life, right? Carrying that with you through multiple forms. We have the white rose. Roses in the tarot represent desire. The white rose represents the purified desire that's in total alignment with the high self. Desire with thorns represents both the flourishing beauty of when you get that desire and the thorny pain of when the desire is thwarted, right? Or when you get it and then you're bummed out because you didn't actually want that thing, which sometimes happens. And so he's carrying it lightly, though. He's not being pricked by it. He's walking with total freedom. We have a wand on which the satchel is, and you'll see as we move through the course that wands connect to an energy that sometimes people talk about, like a magic wand, right? If you've ever watched Harry Potter, they all have wands, and magicians and wizards all have wands, right? But the wand is representative of the capacity to direct your desire, the capacity to see clearly how your desires affect material reality. And so we have this energy of what he carries. And he travels quite lightly, you'll see. He doesn't need that much. Now, on top of his head, you'll see the green wreath, the sort of blonde hair, which represents the electric energy of the sun, right? Coming into manifestation, bound by the green wreath of plant matter. And you might know that plant matter, the plant kingdom, is the way we actually trap sunlight on Earth, or rather one of the ways, right? That's the primary way that plants eat. And so when we eat plants, we're actually eating trapped sunlight that has been transmutated to be nourishing for us, which is one of the reasons, green plants are so powerful. And then we have a red feather. And again, this is an eagle feather. Eagles, by the way, are the sacred bird to Zeus or Jupiter. Eagles are the king of the birds, and eagles are also emblematic of Scorpio energy, which represents the aspiration of our desire force, the aspiration of our energy, right? When it raises itself to great heights. And so we see that the Fool is walking here, very capable, right? Very capable of moving through time and space with great freedom. And here we draw in the astrology, because the associated meaning with the Fool is Uranus. Uranus is a planet associated with limitless freedom. And I love that we're doing this now, because there are, it's 2023, and we have been having a very intense Uranus transit for a number of years, which will come to a head next spring in 2024. And sometimes people, regardless of when they have a Uranus transit over a natal planet, they get a little nervous, because Uranus is known for bringing about abrupt change. And as we go through the course, we will be discussing change a number of times. But to move with Uranus is not to fear change, but to invite the total freedom of consciousness to experience what it desires in its purified state. And so as we work through the energy of Uranus, sometimes in transit in manifest reality, we get nervous. We're like, well, I don't want to change my life circumstance. I'm worried about this or that, or something shifted and now I'm, in a tight spot happens. But there's this energy here of total freedom. The freedom of consciousness to experience any form. The freedom of consciousness to be safe esoterically, even in times where by outward appearances, it doesn't appear to be safe. Again, that's the cloak of the Fool. And we're talking at a very high level of esoteric reality. Obviously, in the valley of manifestation below, there's danger, there's, hard times, there's all of these things that aren't the exuberant life of the Fool. Nonetheless, the exuberant life of the Fool is known to be present in all those circumstances. And I hope that this doesn't come off as flippant to think about, but rather as very comforting, so that when you are in your own hour of need, as everyone enters in different moments, that you know that with you, in you, your true nature is this. And to really connect with this energy, to really study this card, to really imbue your consciousness with this card, is to make you more capable in those moments when things are hard, to make you more hopeful. And not just more hopeful, but more powerful itself, because this is the form of your truest power, the form of your truest self. And this is why we call it the Fool's Journey, is because the Fool is the true nature of the self. And as we walk through the path of the tarot, I think you'll enjoy it, because you'll find that this principle, as cool as it is to think about esoterically, arrives in ways that are entirely useful and that can help you in very particular ways. And that's what, the other cards will suggest and show to you. So that is the Fool card. And I hope it's clear to you by now that these cards show us a lot of meaning. And the little bit I've said today is less than enough in a certain sense, because the meanings of this card are quite robust and will continue to come forth. You will see as we move through these cards that continuing to return to cards will give additional meaning to subsequent cards. And so anything from the placement of the sun in this card, the use of color in this card, the use of symbol in this card will start to show up in new and interesting ways. And you'll remember where you are on the Fool's Journey as you enter each new card. So I guess one more thing, the key 0, right? 0 is this circle. It's the infinite, unchangeable number. There's only one other number that you can write without picking up your pen over and over, and that is 8, right? So we have this energy of 0, which is infinite. It's also the ring outside of which nothing exists. And it's depicting this quality of the no thing, which is the quality of everything, but which is unknowable in a certain sense. So it is, nothing you can define. It's nothing you can measure. It's nothing you can see, and yet it is, right? And that's what we're looking at when we look at this card. So is it a fool, or is it wisdom, or is a fool wise, or are the wise foolish, right? We have this sort of question, inquiry. And as you work with the Fool card, you learn to breathe deeper and deeper. So we're going to do a little practice right now, which is simply breathing. And, in yoga, maybe some of you took that. We taught like a 50-hour pranayama course a couple of years ago. There are so many different breathing methods and techniques. In this system, all we're going to do here is work to take a deep breath. So when you breathe, so often in society, and I always joke that I have a beef with Abs of Steel franchise, because they made people think that their abdomen should be so rock solid because of, all their workouts or whatever. But really your abdomen should be able to move. Your low back should be able to move. Your ribs should be able to move, and you should be able to take a deep breath. And then you should be able to exhale completely. This is something that so many people overlook because it is simple, but it is one of the most amazing and magical things you can do. So right now together, we are just going to practice taking 10 deep breaths. That's it. Okay. Here we go. Inhale. Exhale. 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 Now pause and close your eyes. See if you can notice the subtle pulsation of your spine. See if you can notice that the breath naturally continues a little deeper, a little more calm, and a little more free. You can release the practice now. And by the way, people often translate pranayama in yoga, right? We have breath practice, we call it pranayama. They often call it or translate it as the control of the breath. But there's a thing in Sanskrit where the A sound in front of a word can negate it. And so it might actually be pranayama, right? Which actually would mean the freeing of the breath. And so is the control of the breath? Is it the freeing of the breath? When we invite ourselves to breathe in a way in which we are, mentally associated with, are we actually freeing the breath even as we control our attention, right? This is one of the things to consider. Okay, you guys, thank you so much for being here at class 1. This concludes our conversation about the Fool. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you again tomorrow for the Magician.